welcome. It's November 14th, which is Fanny Hensel's birthday. I'm going to start by reading a part of a letter that Fanny wrote to her brother Felix Mendelssohn just after her 31st birthday. She writes, "At this stage in my life, I actually think that a person between the ages of 16 and 61 just doesn't need a birthday, although I like to celebrate everybody else's birthday. And so I've given up the customary ritual of cake and accessories for a long time. But a letter, a friendly face, or a dear drawing by Sebastian, that's her son, anyone would not be pleased by these would have to be older than old." So Fanny Hensel is not between the ages of 16 and 61. Today is her 220th birthday, which means we do have Fanny's permission to celebrate it. So let's start by introducing ourselves. Do you want to go first, Sharon?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sharon Sue. I am a classical pianist, and for the last several years, I have been tailoring my concert programs, my solo concert programs, to be roughly 50-50 gender balanced, which to some people makes me an expert at women composers. Which I think says more about the state of classical music than of me and my supposed expertise. But I've really enjoyed for the last several years really getting to explore a whole world of music that I didn't study in conservatory. And it's been really fun to learn about the lives of so many amazing women composers. Because, like I said, since I didn't learn about them, I go out of my way to read their biographies and try to find out more about these people who make this music that we don't hear enough of. And I think Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel is one of the most fascinating composers, like not even like women composers, just like composers, like full stop, in the Romantic era. And I think her music deserves a lot more play, and I'm really excited to talk about her sonata today, which I have a recording of coming out today.
Awesome. And yeah, I'm Molly, and I run the website henselpushers.org, where I post free scores of Fanny Hensel's music. And I also make arrangements and special editions of Fanny Hensel's music too. So I think we'll start by just talking a little bit about who Fanny Hensel was. Like you said, she's a early romantic composer, born in Hamburg, but lived most of her life in Berlin, in Prussia. And she was a prolific composer. She wrote over 460 pieces of music in her life, even though she only lived to be about 41 years old. And she is most known for being the older sister of Felix Mendelssohn. But like Felix, she was super prodigiously talented as a young child. She got the same training as Felix as they were both growing up. They had the same composition teachers, music teachers, and because she was about almost 4 years older than him, she had the developmental advantage. So when they were children, everyone thought that Fanny was the more talented of the two, mostly because she was a little bit older. But as they grew up, Felix had these opportunities to work with larger and larger formats, string orchestras and full orchestras, and was encouraged to play music on a really grand scale, to compose professionally, to tour with, as a conductor and a composer. And Fanny was kind of encouraged to do music, but to keep it small scale, to keep it inside the home, to really keep it appropriate for a woman to do, a woman of the 19th century to do. So that's Fanny, and like I said, she wrote 466 numbered works, which is a lot. But I think today we're mostly going to focus on one work in particular. Do you want to tell us about that work?
Yeah. So I'm releasing today a recording of Fanny's G minor sonata, which she wrote in 1843, and I didn't do the math on how old she was when she wrote this.
She would have been 37,
That
I
sounds
think.
right. That
Yeah,
sounds right.
37.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so it's a super interesting, extremely compelling piece that just grabbed me when I first heard a recording of it. And it was actually, I think, the second movements, which I will talk about in a bit, that really got me. But the whole sonata is just a super fascinating piece. It's in four movements, but it's not really your typical sonata. She does just really interesting things with form, and you can tell it's not because she doesn't know how sonata form works, but it's because she is so, I think, comfortable in her musical language that she is doing really interesting things with it. And I'll talk about it in just a bit, but I have a theory that the sonata, or at least aspects of the sonata, were originally intended to be a piano concerto, but as you said, she was not encouraged to compose on a grand form or, to do something as sort of scandalous for a well-off woman as soloing in, playing a piano concerto. So my hunch is that she took some concerto ideas and put them into this sonata.
So you said the second movement is your favorite, or what caught you? What do you like about it? What's it like?
Well, like when I was listening to it for the first time, like I heard the first movement, I was like, oh, like, great, great piece, love it. Let's hear the second movement. And the thing about second movements or slow movements in sonata is like sometimes they're really great. And sometimes, I hate to say it, they're snooze fests.
It's true.
Like sometimes some composers, not gonna name composers or sonatas, but sometimes you listen to the second movement and you're like, you know what, this was written for the sake of having a slow movement in the middle, and that's kind of it. So I didn't have super high expectations for the second movement when it came along. I'm like listening to it and going like, all right, let's see what happens. And then it just took me way by surprise because it just goes into this material that I can only describe as being proto-impressionist. And it is just so ethereal and beautiful and like kind of haunting. And it doesn't sound like it belongs to the German Romantic era. And in fact, what it reminded me of was not just Impressionism in general, but actually a couple of years before that, I had played a piece by Liszt called Les Jeux de la Ville d'Est, which is actually one of the inspirations for Ravel's Jeux d'eau for the piano, which,
Interesting.
if you don't know it, really, well-known Impressionist work, it's Ravel's work is meant to sound like water. And he was inspired by Liszt's piece, which I believe was written in 1877, which is also meant to display or to depict water. And Liszt writes all these runs and virtuosic like arpeggios and stuff in a way that sounds like water, where it's not so much about the individual notes but about the gestures. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, I guess Liszt invented Impressionism because I've never encountered something like this prior to the Impressionists. And then I heard this sonata by Fanny and I went like, oh my gosh, this is proto-impressionism. I thought like, oh, maybe she was inspired by, Liszt's work. So I looked up the years. Liszt wrote his in 1877. She wrote hers in 1843.
Mm-hmm.
So she got the jump on him by several decades. So I just went like, oh my gosh, I think I just found, the seed of impressionism. I'm sure there are other ones in music that we don't know of and that there are other influences, but that was really exciting to me that she was doing things that were really, really revolutionary and kind of radical, especially considering that she wasn't encouraged to have really a public musical life. So I just thought that was really, really special. So that second movement to me,
Mm-hmm.
I won't say it's my favorite because I don't pick favorites. It's a
I
really
do. It's
special
my
movement.
favorite for sure. Speaking of kind of interesting form, the first movement is very short for a typical, you think of like an opening movement of a sonata, like it's only a couple minutes long. It's very
Yeah.
compact.
It clocks in at under 5 minutes, which is really almost kind of strange because sonata first movements, especially by the time we're in the Romantic era, can be like really long. Like in some cases, they're
Hmm.
like longer than the whole rest of the piece combined.
Right.
And this is pretty short, which is also surprising given that it has like really big ideas and it's like a very muscular movement. But it's so compact and it doesn't necessarily feel like it's too short. It doesn't feel like she ran out of ideas. It kind of feels like she said what she had to say and then she was done. And you're like, wow, all right, cool,
Yeah.
great ideas.
Succinct. Yeah.
Yeah. I think some composers in that era could have learned from that, not naming names.
Brahms. I can't stand
You're naming names,
Brahms.
yeah.
I'll do it. Brahms has, I'm gonna get canceled by the Brahms people. Brahms has beautiful melodies and beautiful ideas, and then they just go on way too long. Like they just keep going, and I'm done with it. Anyway,
Yeah.
we can cancel other people too as it comes up, or I will, and you can keep your hands
We're
clean.
just smack talking everyone who isn't naming Mendelssohn Hensel today.
Yeah, I'm ready to do it.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so you said well, let's talk about the other movements too. The third movement is it's another the second movement scherzo is
Mhm.
like a that's a quintessentially like Henselian Mendelssohnian style, right? You think about like the scherzo from Midsummer Night's Dream that Felix wrote,
Mhm.
and then the scherzo from Fanny's string quartet is also iconic. And then like in Daciar, February is also a scherzo. Like they just have this facility. Think of scherzos as like light and fun and upbeat and like kind of jokey and happy. But like the best Mendelssohn Hensel scherzo have this like eeriness to them, and they're like in a minor key and like a little bit like you said haunting before, and
Mhm.
it's just such a spectacular thing. And then another style that they both do, both brother and sister, do really well is the third movement, like the like gondolide style, right? Like
Mhm.
a boat song, kind of like a lot of lilting, 6/8, 9/8, um, also kind of watery sounding pieces.
Mhm. Yeah,
Tell me more
it's
about the third movement.
I really love the third movements. Again, middle movements of sonatas often they're just, kind of they're there, but this movement is just really fun. It made me think immediately of Felix's songs without words, which I think is like
Mhm.
a really famous like little genre of music that he made. And in researching, I found that Fanny also had her own version of songs without words. I think she called them. You may know this better than me. She had a different name for them.
She called, let's see, well, like just like leader for the piano
Yeah, something
or
like that. Like,
yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
mean, it was just a thing that the siblings,
yeah.
I think, together created. And there's some speculation about like whether some of the pieces were based on poems, like maybe like the melodies, maybe there is a poem that you could set, metrically to this, or sometimes it's,
Mhm.
it's just the feel of it with this, this melodic line that sounds like a voice, but for the piano. And that's really where I think that's where Fanny really excelled, because she was as a wealthy woman, she was allowed especially to do solo piano, like character pieces, not huge, sonatas
Right.
were kind of the extent of what she was allowed to do, but like character pieces, and leader, for one singer and one pianist. And so that's what most of her, I think maybe 80% of her output of the pieces that she wrote are one of those two genres. And because she was so constrained to that, like she really put her heart into it. She really did that really well. So that's kind of the style, I think, of the third movement of the
Yeah.
sonata.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like as an aside, what I found when I've researched women composers in general is that a lot of them wrote so many art songs, like so many works for vocalists and piano, because that
Mhm.
was kind of largely the most socially acceptable genre for them to write in. So a lot of them write really beautiful like melodies, and
Mhm.
even when they're not writing for of an actual vocalist, they write in a way that is very just very vocal in style, which I love and I have a great time with because I can sing. No one wants to hear me sing. I don't enjoy it that much. So it's really great for me to have pieces that are very song-like, but that I can do, on a medium that I'm better at than,
Mhm.
you know, using my actual vocal cords.
Very
So
fair.
I love the third movement. I think of it almost as being operatic, like it kind of has like that
Mm.
light Italian aria vibe.
Mhm.
And it's got that like really like sort of buoyant,
Mm.
like triple meter feel, um, where you have the like bum 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 like
Mhm.
feeling. Very, yeah, almost like you're sort of like bobbing along in the water.
Mhm.
And if I recall correctly, before she wrote this sonata, Fanny took a trip to Italy, and
Hmm.
she loved Italy. One of my favorite things about Fanny is that she's kind of got that girl who studies abroad energy.
Oh,
You know how like
completely. Oh, completely.
like like your friend who studies abroad in some European city, and they come back and they're like, I'm Parisian now, or I am
Yeah.
Viennese, and like their whole personality is like that they were shaped by this other country they were in. And like Fanny is kind of like that. Like she loved Italy, big fan of like the culture, the style, like the music, the art, everything. And I feel like she had a really strong sense of like wanting to put Italianness into her pieces, which like I love for her. Um,
Hmm.
in fact, if I remember correctly, she wrote a song called Italian, which was
Hmm.
Queen Victoria's favorite.
That's right.
Yeah, so Fanny, like I said, big exchange student or study abroad girl energy. So she took
And
a
the
trip to,
funny thing about that is she had that energy before she even went to Italy. She
yeah,
had that for decades before she went to Italy. The song
yeah,
Italian, she wrote that, yeah, more than a decade
yeah.
before she went there. She went, I think, as a family, the family, I think the mom, dad, I think all four kids went on a trip to Switzerland when she was like
Mm,
a mid-teenager, maybe I want to
mhm,
say something like that. And from the Swiss Alps, she could see Italy, and I think that's when it started. So ever since
mm,
then, she talked about like, gosh, I got so close to it, I gotta go back. And then, yeah, like you said, she went back from 1839 to 40. She spent a year in Italy.
mm,
So it was a significant trip. And her husband, Wilhelm Hensel, who is a visual artist, painter primarily, had lived in Rome for 5 years.
oh,
So
that's
he
right.
had this connection to Italy too. So she, that was another strengthening aspect of it. And like her time in Italy it's such a fascinating time in her life. And I think the most important part of that, obviously, like she got to fulfill this personal dream of going there that she had wanted to do for so long.
Mhm,
But while she was there, they made friends with a group of young French artists at the no, it wasn't the I forget which. It was the French Arts Institute, right? When you win the Prix de Rome, you get
yeah.
sent there to the French Academy. So they met a bunch of young musicians and visual artists, including Charles Gounod, by the way. He was
Mm,
a 20-year-old, 20-something-year-old when they met there. And these young French artists worshipped Fanny. They saw how talented she was, and they would ask her to play her songs. They would have little composing games. Someone gave her a French poem and she set it to music the next day and played it for them. Like they had this just fantastic, imagine being on a vacation for a year and just getting like fun like art assignments every
yeah,
day from
yeah.
your friends, right? Like
And then
that's
getting like
basically what
really
it
gassed
was.
up by these friends and
Yeah,
being told like,
right.
yeah.
Exactly. And they're the ones who are like, you need to publish this. Like, you're so good. Like, everyone needs to hear this. Like, why don't you play more? Right. Like,
Hmm.
so that's what she came back from Italy with that energy of
Yeah.
like, I can do this. I am the shit. I am going to publish my stuff. Right. Like, it was still a few more years before she published. But like, so I think you're totally right that like that Italian vibe, it shows up. I mean, it showed up a little bit before, but especially after that trip, it really became part of her musical language.
Yeah, I feel like that energy and the sonata kind of just like really speaks to me because like I've had that experience of going abroad and like, oh, I am like a European now, and then like also getting like a lot of like great validating feedback of people like pulling you aside and being like, you are really talented, like keep going, stuff like that, like getting that
Hmm.
validation. Like you feel so good when you get back home. You're just like, yeah, like I'm great. I am a like amazing creator and an artist. And so like it gives you like this energy that you can't, get otherwise. So like I feel like you can feel that in Sonata, and you can
Hmm.
feel Fanny being really, really confident in herself, where you don't feel like she's imitating anyone or trying to follow certain, forms or styles. Like she's doing her own thing, and you can feel her just being really unapologetic about it, and in fact being kind of, proud. And that really comes through, I think, in every movement. But that third movement, I feel like, does really directly contain like the germ of her, like her Italianness, her confidence, her. I I feel like you listen to it or you play it, and you get the sense that she's really thinking about this really great golden time in her life, about, you know, that time in Italy, feeling that good. And you kind of get that sense where there's a lot of like ease to it. And
Hmm.
it's ease that just feels so refreshing after the sort of other moods you get in the first and second movements. And it's just really fun. So I love it. It's my way of being able to sing an aria but on the piano. And it has those like breezy operatic vibes, and it's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She does that she has that ease about her. Nothing feels forced. I mean, it can feel forced to play because it's technically very difficult to play often, but like the sound of it, like it sounds so simple, but is like so perfectly constructed. Like so much of her music has that quality.
Yeah. And good
And what
play.
about the last move? Speaking of
Yeah.
impossible to play, the last movement
Oh
is
my gosh. When you mentioned like ease refers to how it sounds and not how it is to play, I'm like, yeah, that's totally true because this is not an easy sonata. I think there's often um, an assumption that people make that music by women is not as technically difficult, and I've heard, you know, it's because they had smaller hands
little
or they're
hands.
strong or whatever, and it's like, nope, I'm here to tell you that is absolutely not correct. Like the music I play by women is just as hard, sometimes harder, you know. For example, like I have sort of smallish hands, and I've been working on Clara Schumann's music, and like she had big hands, like so many tenths and big chords in there that like I can't reach, and I'm like, whoever told me that, you know, women's music is easier because they've got smaller hands was like completely and utterly wrong, because like these are like Rachmaninoff level chords. But I digress. The whole sonata, not easy to play. That third movement we were talking about where there's a sense of ease, there's like stuff going on there where you have to like really be on top of things, and if you know, miss like one middle note in a cluster of things, like the whole thing's shot. The fourth movement is maybe the epitome of this dynamic, where it it's very sing-songy, very like it's kind of playful,
Hmm.
but it is so hard to play in a way that doesn't pay off. And what I mean by that is some really virtuosic work, like almost anything by Liszt, it's
Hmm.
hard, and the difficulty is like part of the appeal. Like the audience watches or listens and goes like, "Oh, that's hard," and like they're all
Right.
impressed by
It
it.
sounds hard.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It is
it's
hard and it
visibly
sounds
hard.
hard.
The fourth movement of the sonata is hard, and the audience doesn't see it. If you pull
Hmm.
it off successfully, it just feels, again, effortless, playful. Um, it's got yeah, like that sing-songy, like almost like childlike vibe to it, but it's so difficult. It's almost the entire thing. You've got the melody or the little like, you know, motif happening in sort of the upper fingers, and
Hmm.
then you've got just these gnarly like triplets going da 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 da, like over and over again, like nonstop in all your other fingers, and sometimes it works. The weakest parts, like the weakest, you know, relationships in your fingers, and it all has to be like even, and you know, like both in terms of rhythm and tone, and it's basically like a technical exercise that doesn't stop, and if you do it right, it doesn't sound hard.
Yeah.
Which sometimes as a pianist, I want things to sound hard because I want people to
You want
respect
the credit
the
for
labor.
it.
Yeah.
And
So
it's long too. The last
yeah,
movement is long too. So
yeah.
it goes on and on and on and on and on.
You have to have stamina for this, like not just physically, but also kind of mentally, because if you
Mm.
sort of like let your mind wander while you play it, like then you'll lose your audience because you have to like keep a really sharp mind through the entire thing. It's yeah, it's difficult, and it's like it's proof that Fanny was an amazing pianist, because like no one can look at this movement and go like, oh, she probably was, you know, like an amateur. Like no, she was good.
Yeah, there are accounts of people hearing her play, and obviously they're just, you know, I don't think it was disputed that she was a better technical pianist than Felix was. Of course, that's not what he's known for, but she
Yeah.
was an incredible pianist. And then it's funny, there was a few cases, I don't remember the details about when and whatever now, but where we have like her diary where she wrote about a time that she played at a party or something. She rarely played in public. And she'll be like, oh, it was so horrible. I sounded terrible. Like, I'm so embarrassed. And like, we've all had that experience where like you have a really bad time and you're like, oh my God, I don't even
Yeah.
want to think about it. And
Yeah.
so that's what she was writing in her diary. And then you like read the letters of someone who was at that party and they were like, holy shit, like she's really good, and like just didn't notice it at all. So yeah, for her, her standards were high because she's such, so incredibly talented.
Yeah, that's so relatable. I mean, like you said, we've all had that experience. I still have that experience. Sometimes, like every time I perform, I'll be like,
Yeah.
like that was so bad. I can't like show my face to the world ever again. And people are like, that was amazing. Like I love this. Like so, yeah. I think um, Fanny's one of those people who, like, the more I learn about her, just even as you are in awe of how talented she is, how brilliant she is, how she was just like so. There was like so much talent that largely, didn't get the, I think, recognition it should have. She was also a hugely relatable person. Like she was just such a person, and so
She's so
many things.
funny. Yeah.
Like I read by her or I read about her, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I'm the same way, or like that's so funny, or like oh, like you thought that too. It's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's one of the great things about, the good thing about her. I mean, there's lots of good things about her coming from the family that she came from, but the fact that, obviously Felix and she were both, very successful musicians. She wasn't very well known outside of her musical circle outside of Berlin. But they came from, their grandfather, Moses Mendelssohn, was one of the most important Enlightenment philosophers, right? So they came from this family that was very notable, and then her on her mother's side, her maternal either grandfather or great grandfather had, he was a very important, he had the position of court Jew, which there's a whole lot to unpack there, but it was a very important role, at the time. He was a very important figure, and the fact that she came from these two lineages that were so notable meant that they kept everything, right? Like we have so many of their letters, we have all of her manuscripts. That's why I can go through and, make these editions of all of her manuscripts, because they're all pretty much all saved. I mean, obviously there's ones that we don't know about that aren't there, but we have hundreds of them because the whole family knew that they wanted to save this for posterity because their family had something important, to preserve.
yeah,
So we're, yeah, fortunate that they did. And yeah, then you get to read her diaries and her letters and see how, yeah, relatable and funny, and yeah, how, I mean, I would love to have been able to just talk to her and spend time with her, because she seems like a really cool, down to earth, funny, self-deprecating, but interesting, smart, talented person.
yeah. Like I do feel like it's so easy to fall into the trap with composers and artists to be like, I think I'd be their friend. I think that with everyone. Like I've thought that I
Me
could be
too.
anyone's friend, even though I'm like,
Absolutely.
yeah,
He
but no,
wasn't
it's
friends
kind
with anybody.
of Beethoven was a nightmare. I probably would have been like, I don't want to be this guy's friend. But with Fanny, I'm like, I really feel like we would have been friends, or I would have at least wanted to be her friend. I may not have been cool enough for her, but like,
Yeah.
she's so cool.
Totally.
Yeah.
So talking, you said something earlier that would have been a great transition right now, but I forgot it. So I'm just going to go to the next point, which is that, what was it? It was something about how, she's not, constrained by form and blah, blah, blah. Talk about your concerto project around this sonata and make that connection for us.
Yeah. So I didn't really feel this hunch until I started actually learning to play the sonata. So, like I said, I listened to it when this is great. I would, I'll learn the whole thing just for the sake of getting to play that second movement.
Hmm.
So I got the score, sat down, started playing, and like immediately, as I'm sight reading the first movement, I'm like, this is not a sonata. This is a concerto. And I felt very, very, very strongly about this. Um, and I feel a little bit like that meme of the guy with like the red, yarn, like
Hmm.
conspiracy theory type
Hmm.
of thinking, where I'm like, listen, like I think it's this, but I really do actually think that I have a, like to stand on. I can make a solid case for it. It starts out like in the very opening of the first movement of the sonata. You get the first theme twice, which is kind of
Mhm.
weird. Like just boom, boom. Like it happens twice, which is not really typical in sonatas, and it's sort of orchestrated differently. Like the first time, it's got like a sort of fuller orchestral sound. I think for me, the giveaway is that there's like a big tremolo in the bass. Which not only is kind of shorthand for, you know, a fleshed out orchestral sound on the piano, it typically represents symphony. That
Mhm.
is also how Felix's G minor concerto starts. Felix's concerto, also in G minor, starts with a
Mhm.
timpani roll in the bass, and in the piano reduction of the concerto, it is notated with the exact same figuration. So I
Mhm.
was like, oh, what a weird coincidence that like the sonata starts out the exact same way as the piano reduction of Felix's G minor concerto, and then the second move or the first theme happens again a second time. This time it's kind of more pianistic, and I was like, interesting that it's first like an orchestral version of the theme, and then immediately it's a piano version of the theme, kind of like a concerto where the orchestra says the thing and then the piano repeats it. I was like, interesting. And then I got to like the second theme, which it was very woodwindy. It sounded like the
Mhm.
sort of classic second theme that a woodwind always plays in a minor piano concerto. I was like, oh, like wow, that is such a like yeah, woodwindy theme to happen there. And like I just kept going, and like through the entire sonata, or the entire first movement, I just went like, this is all a bunch of like concerto stuff, and then it kind of builds to like a big moment where it has that classic concerto dynamic of like the orchestra fighting the piano. So it's like the orchestra goes
Mhm.
like boom, boom, and then the piano goes like boom, boom, and then it goes back and forth where they're like fighting each other. Um, and that is something that is just classic concerto. I mean, you see it happening in like the Beethoven concertos. And so I was like, knowing what I know about Fanny, about how she was a composer at least on par with her brother, um, if not, as you've mentioned, sometimes considered more talented than he was. That she was a very accomplished virtuoso pianist. That she clearly had a lot of ideas, but was restricted by what was socially acceptable at the time. The fact that her own father had said to her that music for her was more of an ornament than it was her profession, like it was for Felix. And knowing how close the siblings were, and that Felix himself was writing, he was writing symphonies and concerti and like all these really big works, there was no way that Fanny, as an equally talented, sibling, would have looked at what he was doing and went like, yeah, I don't want to do any of that. Like that's like, sorry, like that is bullshit. Like she would
Mhm.
obviously would have wanted to do the same things, and I'm sure she would have had ideas for the same things. So I was like, it just makes perfect sense that she would have felt like the genesis of concerto, but not have the outlet for it. So she would have put it into a form that she'd be more, that would be more acceptable for her to write in. So it made perfect sense to me that this sonata would have her basically like concerto ideas. Um, and I can apply this thesis to the other movements too. Like there's so many things about them that are actually very orchestral, even as they are very pianistic. And it does feel like she kind of goes back and forth between more pianistic writing and then more orchestral type writing. And there's like just a lot of stuff in the sonata that like you see in orchestral productions for piano. Like if you play as a pianist, I've had to do a lot of accompanying. So I've had to play a lot of orchestral reductions. So, like, I know what they look like. So I kind of went, like, this seems deliberate. This doesn't seem like she would have accidentally written something as if it were an orchestral reduction. So I took to Twitter with this hypothesis because that was back when Twitter was kind of good. And I just, like, laid out some of my ideas and I was like, hey, like, I think this was meant to be a concerto. And how cool would it be if someone orchestrated it as a concerto? And um, a magical thing happened where a bunch of people kind of joined in and went like, hey, like that's an idea. Like I want to be part of this. So a composer friend, Patricia Wallinga, like jumped in and was like, hey, like I'll orchestrate it if someone else can like be the like sponsoring organization. And then another friend, Andres Ballesteros, went like, hey, like I'm with an organization that does cool projects like this. We have an orchestra. Like if you get it arranged, we'll do it. And it was one of those like, is this really happening things where I was just like, oh my goodness. Like I was just like on Twitter being like, here's this like crazy idea I have that will like, nothing will come of it. And in fact, people were on board. So it took several years because nothing in classical music moves quickly. And also, this happened right before the pandemic, and then COVID hit and kind of delayed everything, pushed stuff out by a couple years. But it was a lot of work, but we did eventually get to the finish line of doing a workshop premiere of a full orchestral concerto version of this sonata, orchestrated by Patricia and put on by the Ballet Russe Arts Initiative in Boston. And I premiered the performance, and it was, I mean, like it was awesome. Can I say that? It was really awesome. It's really magical. It was like kind of a dream scenario for me. Like, would not have thought that something like that could happen. So, thank you, Internet. And I think what's really cool about the concerto, which unfortunately for various reasons, it's not freely available, is that it makes the sonata make so much more sense. I think the sonata is super great as a piano work. Like, I don't want to knock it. But when you hear it in orchestral form, so many of the ideas just make more sense. And even stuff like we were talking about, the compactness of the first movement, once you throw a cadenza in there, and I wrote a cadenza for that movement, it suddenly like makes the structure make more sense. Like it does have a moment in the original sonata where it feels like cadenza should have gone there. And
Where is that? Is that right before the recapitulation, or where did you put it?
it's after the recapitulation. It's in the recapitulation. It's kind of
Okay.
right before the end. So like basically, there's like a bunch of ascending chords where it's like orchestra goes boom, and then the piano goes bum 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 bum,
Mm.
and then it lands on a 5/7 chord. And in the sonata, it just like goes right into the theme that takes to the end. And in the concerto, we went that 5/7 chord feels kind of significant. Let's have that be the entry point for the cadenza, and then the cadenza goes, and then it goes kind of almost seamlessly into the end. So it even the structure of the sonata like felt very conducive to being turned into a concerto. So yeah, it just like it made a lot more sense, and I felt very gratified and very validated when the author M.T. Anderson showed up to the premiere, which was
Mhm.
like a huge surprise. And he actually had like he was familiar with the original sonata, and he came up to me and he was like, "I heard the sonata. It's not." He said something about it not like being really there, not super satisfying as a solo piano work, and I'm like greatly butchering what he said to me, and I apologize for that. And he said it makes so much more sense as a concerto. He's like, it just like sounds right when it's with orchestra. Like all the ideas that don't make a lot of sense as the piano version, like make so much more sense and they sound better like orchestrally. So that did feel very validating. That I wasn't like a crazy person being like, hey, like I think this was meant to be.
Well, also there's another, you probably know this, and I should have looked this up because I don't remember all the details, and I did know that we were going to talk about this today. Was she one of Fanny Hensel's few public performances, was her performing Felix's G minor piano concerto,
Mm,
and I think that was not long before she composed this. This may have
yeah,
been like the year before or something like that, or maybe even just a few months before.
yeah,
So she definitely had it on her mind around this time. So yeah, it totally
yeah.
makes sense.
I mean, there's no way you don't play your brother's G minor piano concerto and not have that gestate and create, more ideas. And yeah,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
I'm
there's
making,
also a connection to his, right around the time that she wrote this, he also, it's the same time he wrote his really fantastic cello sonata. And there's a lot of similarities to there. Each movement kind of lines up in terms of character. The overarching structure, harmonic structure of it is pretty similar. So there's some, I mean, it's really well known that both siblings were super influenced by what the other one was doing all the time. So uh it's quite possible that she was pulling from all of those at once. And yeah, I think that the concerto hypothesis is well supported.
yeah. And I think I'm not recalling which exact piece it was at this moment, but I do remember that she like wrote in a letter or something in regards to another solo piano work that she wrote that was kind of like big in form and it was kind of grand. That I think she like said outright that when she writes things like this, she is thinking about how it would be for an orchestra.
Mhm.
So she like has stated like on the record that she is thinking orchestrally when she's writing these bigger works.
Mhm.
So yeah, I have a lot of things to support my hypothesis. And just like you said, it makes perfect sense that like what she was doing and sort of ingesting creatively at the time, like sort of all points to her thinking in these like larger forms. Um, and I think it just makes a lot of sense that there are works of hers that contain the seeds that were meant to be bigger things. And so we can't go back in time and give Fanny, the ability to write, for like symphonies and concerti and stuff, but it does feel a little bit like we are, putting one small pebble on the cosmic scales of justice to like, orchestrate and like basically give her the concerto that she never could have had in her lifetime. Um, so that was a super cool project. And all that to say that when I finally went to record this and record the original solo piano version, I was just like, man, how do I go from having played the concerto version with orchestra to then playing it again as a solo work? And that was just like a really interesting creative conundrum for me because like it's like once you've opened the box, like you can't put things back in the box.
Is it very different, the piano part? I mean, obviously, I imagine the concerto version, you have to give a lot of you give a lot of the parts to the orchestra, but
Mm-hmm.
is it like I've never done anything like that. What's the technical challenge of having both versions in your mind and keeping them separate and doing justice to one versus the other when you're like trying to record the solo version after having done the concerto? Like, what's that process like? What are the technical challenges of that?
It was really difficult, not gonna lie. And actually, one of my biggest fears playing the concerto was that I would slip into playing the sonata version of stuff. And so for that reason, I memorize everything that I play, and I always perform from memory. It's just what I was trained. Um, and for the concerto, I had music with me because I was so scared of like if I were to play the concerto version from memory of messing up and going into the sonata. And I was like, I cannot do that to this poor conductor and orchestra. Um, so we didn't create anything new for the concerto in that like we didn't have to like invent new melodies or like write new material. Like the only sort of new thing was the cadenza that I wrote.
Hmm.
Um, but Patricia did a really great job being very faithful to what was in the sonata and sort of taking the idea and like extrapolating it and being like, if this is what she did on the piano, like she might have meant to like have it be this in the strings or the brass or whatever. Um, and so, like you mentioned, when you take things from the piano and give it to the orchestra, like then the piano's left with less to do. And in a concerto, the piano has to do a lot. So what we did was a lot of changing like textures and stuff. So like for example, where the piano might have like a bunch of like rising chords, we would like create more and make it like arpeggios and things. So it's like there's a
Hmm.
lot of like fleshing things out and being like, well, if the piano no longer has to hold the entire thing together and is freer to do more things, then what could it do that's still in the spirit of what was in the original passage? So there's a lot of like fleshing things out in the fourth movement where we're talking about how the pianist has to do all these things. There's like so much stuff going on. There's all these little filigrees. when you split it out, then like the piano can do a lot more stuff. And so there are moments where, say, the orchestra has, you know, the main melody, and so then we fleshed out like the filigree that the piano's doing, where I'm just going, you know, like in some concerti, the pianist just basically gets like busy work while the orchestra does the what's really going on. So there's some of that.
Hmm.
Um, and there's other things like, you know, like maybe a melody instead of just being single notes becomes octaves or chords and becomes like a chordal thing. So it is actually a very, very different piece where they are kind of not similar at all, the concerto and the sonata version.
Hmm.
So going back and forth between them was really difficult because they're different pieces, but they're the same themes and melodies and everything. Like it still sounds the same. So it was very hard to switch back and forth because I'd be, you know, and some passages are actually like verbatim what they were. So sometimes I'd like
Hmm.
play a passage and then want to go into the next thing and go, that's not how it goes in this
Right,
version. So that was difficult. And then it was also just like conceptually difficult because I mean, so much of playing the piano in my training was play and give it color as if it's an orchestra. Like you want to make this sound like it's a cello. You want to make this sound like it's a flute. And so there's a lot of, you know, in piano naturally um, trying to make it sound like an orchestra. But then once you've heard it and played it as an actual orchestra piece, that's like, well, what am I doing? Like, you know, putting weight into my finger, trying to make it sound like a flute when I now know what it sounds like as an actual flute. So it was hard to go from that expansive palette of color and then go back into, you know, a super small constrained form, and having to try to take the richness that I had like sort of learned and internalized in the concerto form, and then try to make that come out on the piano. That was really difficult because, like, yeah, it's like when you play an orchestral reduction on piano, it can be really hard to make all those, you know, piano notes sound like a bigger thing. And you can imagine it as hard as you can, and you can hear it in your own head, but it's making the audience hear it and understand it that's really, really difficult of like translating that. So that was a challenge. And then also just technical things like it was easier to play the fourth movement when it was me and the orchestra, and having to go back to like doing all my stuff. I was like, man, I gotta like drill these triplets again. So it was definitely a challenge. And I also feel like on the flip side, though, it kind of gave me more freedom because I went, okay, we've already sort of like exploded this sonata and done things to it, and now I get to be more free with it. And even just things like the rhythmic freedom, like when I played it with the orchestra, like I had to be with the orchestra.
Hmm.
And even though like I worked things out with the conductor and the orchestra, was like, hey, like let's take some time there, or let's push in this part. Like you can only do so much with, you know, a whole big group of people, whereas in, you know, the solo piano version, like there's a if I want to just like speed up, I can do that. If I want to like really take my time, you know, and really spin out the high point of a like, you know, aria type melody, like I can do that. So it did give me the freedom to go, now that it's just me, I can do anything I want. And that almost makes up for the like sort of lack of color, where I was like, I can play around a lot more with it because you do have freedom as a soloist that you don't get playing with an ensemble. So it was interesting kind of seeing the how it was creatively different for me after playing it with the orchestra.
That's awesome. And what's the state of this now? I know you had the one kind of workshop performance that was a couple of years ago now at
Mm-hmm.
this point. What's the deal now? Are you going to play it again? Are you looking for what
I I would
sell
love to
sell
play it
the
again.
project again?
Yeah, I'd love to play it again. I think like the ultimate dream is not only to perform it again, but also to record it because I think people should be able to hear it as it is. We are still in the process of like shopping around orchestras. Um, it is a really tough sell to more traditionally run organizations because everyone wants to play what's known, what they, you know, the standards, stuff they know will be hits. It's really hard to sell like larger audiences on a piece where there's a lot of sort of backstory involved, like not
Hmm.
even just about the project, but about like the composer in general. Like a lot of people don't know about Fanny Mendelssohn. And if you, you know, go to like beyond classical music aficionados to like lay people. Like I've had the experience of like telling friends about this project, and I've gone like, you know, Felix Mendelssohn, and they go no.
Yeah.
Now I have to like explain multiple steps of things before I even get to the project. So it's faces I think some uphill challenges in that, as with, I mean, basically all works by what I call non-canonic composers, and that's women, composers of color, where they're not sort of like in the canon. There is a significant challenge, not just in selling it to people, but selling organizations on selling it to people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's more work for them to do. They're already kind of, limited and yeah, it's you I'm not going to get into it. Yeah, it is a challenge, but I really hope that it gets done again, especially on the West Coast, because I want to go see it.
Yeah.
And yeah, recording it would be a great project. So people can contact you, I imagine, if they want to put it on and or have a bunch of money to have you
Oh
record
yeah.
it or
Like
whatever.
I'm here. Email me. Yeah. Call me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, is there anything else about that we didn't talk about the concerto or the sonata or and the recording? What that's on your YouTube, I imagine, your Apple
So
Music's, your
if if all goes right, which you know, I never discount the fact that things could go wrong technologically. It should be out today on your streaming platform of choice. So whether that's Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, whatever. I know there's other like streaming platforms and things. It's gonna be there. It should also be on YouTube because I think it automatically goes to YouTube. Um, but if you follow me, you know, on Blue Sky or on Instagram, or you get my newsletter, like you will get a link to it. So it's out today, and I hope you enjoy it. Now, having heard me talking a lot about what went into it, you can see if any of that comes out in the recording.
awesome, awesome. Okay, I have a few follow-ups to this. If I'm here to provide resources to people who want to play some Fanny Hensel music after they've listened to your recording and you want to go play some yourself. If you want to play it yourself, I have an edition, a critical edition of this very sonata, the piano sonata in G minor. You can buy it on Amazon. I know Amazon sucks, but that's currently the best way for this to happen. And it looks like this. My sister-in-law did the beautiful art. It's not showing up. There it is. Anyway, and also Sharon contributed some editorial pieces to this. So I'll put a link to that. And what else? So if you're not up to playing this extremely technically challenging piece, I also have every month on my Patreon, I put an easy piano arrangement up for subscribers who pay. I forget exactly what, but if you're a paid subscriber, you get a monthly easy piano arrangement. And I also, as we discussed, love the second movement of this sonata, the scherzo. So that is going to be this month's easy piano arrangement. And that is, I think it's an intermediate, maybe early intermediate level. So pretty much anyone with maybe a couple years, 2 years of experience can read their way through that one. And then if you don't want to spend any money, I have a really interesting recommendation for folks. And I don't know if you know this piece, Sharon, but I'm going to recommend it to you too. It's the catalog number is H391. For reference, the sonata is 395. So it was written a couple months before the sonata. It's also in G minor. It is Allegro agitato in G minor, and as you know, the first movement of the sonata is Allegro molto agitato. So
Mm-hmm.
um, my theory and the theory of a lot of Hensel scholars is that this may have been the original movement, the original first movement of the
Mm.
sonata. It's sonata form, but it's really unusual. It's got three themes instead of two themes. In the recapitulation, they're in a different order. But it's got the same kind of descending, opening, falling notes as what ended up being the first movement
Oh,
of the
interesting.
sonata.
Yeah.
So it's a super cool, and it's a fantastic piece. I love it. It's one of my favorite things that she wrote. I don't think there's any recordings of it. um, which is criminal. But and it's very technically difficult to play, but it's a fantastic piece. And that is, I'll put a link to that too, but that is on Henselpushers for free. All of Hensel's original scores are free to use in perpetuity. You can record from them, you can perform from them, whatever you want to do. Those are all on my site. And then those are my Sonata related things. And then I've also got some other arrangements kind of in the spirit of what you've done with the uh, concerto project, is re-envisioning some of her works for larger formats or different ensembles. She wrote, I was just talking to someone the other day, um, for looking for either, like brass music or woodwinds music, right? And Hensel didn't write any of those because, like I said, 80% of her music is just for is art songs or solo piano. And I think if you expand that to choral music, like maybe a cappella choral, or if it's only human voice and piano are the only instruments, one or both or either of those, that's 95% of her work.
Hmm.
So she wrote one string quartet and it's fantastic. She wrote one piano trio and it's fantastic. She wrote one orchestral overture. She kind of like did a little dabble in like
Hmm.
one of each of these kind of other larger forms.
Yeah.
And that's it. So what I've been doing is trying to create more either for instruments that she didn't write for. So I'm working on some flute arrangements right now. I'm a terrible flutist, but I'm trying to get better. So writing some of those, and then arranging recently I arranged some of her solo piano fugues for string quartet. So trying to create more music by Fanny Hensel that you can play if you're not a pianist or a singer, essentially.
I think that's super great. Because yeah, I mean, I think her music should be played more, but there is, the fact that if the sort of barrier for entry to playing the works is you have to be, an instrumentalist of this level, then a lot of people won't be able to play it. So I think it's really great to have arrangements both for people of different levels at the piano, but then also for ensembles, because I think there's a lot of ensembles out there who want to play this music, but they're limited in what repertoire they have. So I think it's super great that you're doing this.
Yeah, and another limit, of course, I mean, it's kind of similar to what you're facing, I'm sure, with the concerto, is that um, ensembles are the kind of ensembles that I want to be able to play Hensel's music are extremely constrained financially, right? And ordering a full set of parts, especially for a new piece of music, is extremely expensive. But you can go on IMSLP and get old stuff, by Mozart or Beethoven or whatever, and play that again, which is why it gets played over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why one of the things that I'm the most proud of that I've done, and I did this with an organization in France called Composer. We made a full edition of Hensel's Overture in C, which is her only orchestral overture, which is a fantastic piece of music, and it's great for youth orchestras, community orchestras, amateur orchestras, and that's kind of one of the biggest groups I know that uses our edition is people who access it because it's free. We also make other parts. She wrote her horn parts are in C and G, but a lot of people who play horn in F. So we have parts available for horns in F and for trumpets in B flat instead of trumpets in C, right? So we try to make it accessible so that so that people of any level can play something by her. Um, and we try to make it free because then people will play it and people will hear it and people will know about it and like it. And if you want to support what I'm doing, you could buy some of the arrangements that helps, or make a donation. But um, I just want people to play it and enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's super great. I think what you're doing, to borrow a term from the tech world, is you're making it frictionless for people to, do the stuff. Because, like, already we have the barrier of getting performers to play music by women or people of color, and then getting audiences to listen to it. And, like, it's bad enough when you have to overcome that barrier of wanting to do it or being willing to do it. And then there are so many other barriers that you've alluded to, like the costs and the additions and having to like do extra work to like transpose things and all that stuff. So I think it's really great that you're doing the work to like lessen that friction for people, because the more accessible you make it, the easier it is for this music to be heard. And like, I really, really believe that like this music has to be heard. Like if you love classical music, like you will love this other classical music, you know? Like I'm very greedy. Like I love the work of, Felix Mendelssohn. He's one of my favorite composers. And when I found that there was like another Mendelssohn who wrote a ton of music, I was like, this is great. Like I want to consume it and I want other people to consume it.
Yeah, that's how I came to it too. I love Felix's music. I love his songs without words. And you're like, oh, wait, he had a sister who supposedly wrote very similar things, and there's
Yeah.
almost 500 more pieces. I was like,
Yeah.
great. And then just started digging in. And indeed, there's a lot of it there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you have anything else to say?
So, if you want to follow along with other things that I do, or see what I'm up to, or see what I've done in the past, you can check out my website at sharonsue.com. Sue is SU, very easy. And on there, you can also sign up for my newsletter, which I write about a lot of things, whatever's on my mind. I mean, I don't know how you describe what I do in my newsletter, but it's the best way to keep up with what I'm working on with my projects, and other recordings that I have coming out, which I do have more of this year. So yeah, follow me on those platforms.
That's great. Yeah, and for me, henselpushers.org is where you can find all the resources. If you want to become a Patreon subscriber, you can find me there, Hensel Pushers. You can also follow for free at Hensel Pushers or at the Patreon, and just to get updates, or sign up for my very limited newsletter on the website. And I basically just email you when there's something new, when there's some new free scores. Um, thank you so much, Sharon. This has been a lot of fun. I hope Fanny is satisfied with how we have marked the occasion of her birthday. Um, and yeah, everyone have a really great day. Think about Fanny, listen to some of her music.
Yeah, thanks so much for talking to me today, Molly.